ibuprofen. That's why I'm standing.
Let me message Martin. Take an aspirin or something.
No, don't do that. Go right to Kara's now.
Take an aspirin.
Okay. All right, it is time. It's 12:30. Greetings, everyone. We're spread out a little more than I would like, so it'd be kind of cool if you kind of tightened up. But today we have, and there's a light show, lasers and smoke machines soon enough. That's what we do here. So, no. Super excited to have Renee Collins, with us this afternoon as the special guest, not only to us, but also the featured soloist with the Rogue Valley Symphony, the orchestra manager of which is standing to my left. And he'll have a few words to say, Mark Knipple. But before I pass it off to Mark, I wanted to bring your attention to the concert, several of you need concert credits. You can spend $5 and get one of those, all right, for the concert tomorrow evening at 7:30. And then another opportunity on Saturday, also for $5. So if you wanted to go to both of them, that would be 2 credits. So $10 for 2 credits. And you might want to do that because the music is really interesting. I brought my orchestration students last night, several of them, to rehearsal, and the 2 pieces that we heard Amen by Carlos Simon, and then I don't remember Keiko, but the first
Keiko
name.
Abe.
Keiko
And
Abe.
that's the Prism Rhapsody, which features Britton Renee.
Right, which has 1 billion notes in it, and Britton plays almost all of them. So that's what's happening this weekend. I also have another announcement. This is from our illustrious director of bands, Dr. Christy Lundahl, and here's the message. I sent this in email, but maybe you did not see this in email. She says, "Greetings, music students. So sorry I can't be there today. 2 weeks from tomorrow, we are hosting our annual SOU Honor Band event, and we'll have over 100 high school students from around the state milling about, and they're going to need direction. The students will be here from Friday, December 2nd through Sunday, December 4th, and we'll be in rehearsals, master classes, electives, and we'll get a great feel for our campus. About half of them are coming from great distance to be here, and we'll be staying 2 nights in a dorm and eating meals at the Hawk. We are in need of a few more college chaperones for this event. Duties will include walking the group of high schoolers across campus to their meals and housing, staying in the dorm for a couple of nights, and making sure they stay safe and out of trouble, and showing them how wonderful our music family is here at SOU, etc. Please read that email. If you have any interest in being a volunteer for this event, we could certainly use your help in this capacity, okay? So please write Dr. Christy Lindahl if you have interest in this. Without further ado, please, Mark.
Hi, everyone. I'm a fellow SOU grad, so I'm just going to put that out there. Go Raiders.
Go Raiders.
Happy to have brought Britton Renee here. She's actually been doing some visits to some high schools as well, which we partnered with the Brit Music and Arts Festival to make that happen, so that's exciting. And then Britton obviously is also playing as our featured soloist all weekend. There's, as Derek said, there's concert tomorrow night, 7:30. Saturday, 3 p.m. both here at SOU. There's also a concert at 3 p.m. in Grants Pass on Sunday, if that is of interest to you or if that's easier for you to get to. All of those $5 tickets for students, just bring your ID to the box office. We'll be kind of in the middle, like straight out that way, set up for our box office for that. Britton's playing work by Japanese composer Keiko Abe called Prism Rhapsody. Very interesting work. It's a pretty cool program too. There's another work, sort of a symphony on the program, is William Levi Dawson's Negro Folk Symphony, written in the 1930s. It's kind of lost to the dustbin of history, and it really should never have been because it is a wonderful piece of music. But anyway, enough plugging of the concert. I want to just go ahead and turn it over to Britton Renee to play and talk at you about her career and such. So, thanks, Britt.
Thank you. This is on. Hello.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'll just stand here. My name is Britt. I'm a percussionist. I'm originally from Florida, and I am a lover of contemporary music, of new music. A lot of what I do is focused on solo and chamber performance. So I'm part of two New York City-based ensembles. One is Excelsis Percussion Quartet, and the other is a duo that I have with a very talented violinist, and that's called Vision Duo. We do a lot of violin and marimba type of works together. I was actually classically trained since the age of 5 in piano performance, so I also really have a deep love for classical music. In 2020, during my undergrad studies at the University of Toronto, I won the Conservatoire Skill Competition, and I've since been touring and performing across North America through joining the roster and getting artist management. And right now I'm completing my master's at the University of Michigan, so I'm based in Ann Arbor currently. And as you heard, I'm here for this performance with RBSO, but I'm also just very excited to be here to have this opportunity to speak with all of you. I want to use this time as more of an open forum, so if you have any questions at any point, please feel free to ask away. I'm really excited to talk about the marimba today. It's one of my favorite percussion instruments, and I think that a lot of us know what the marimba is, but we rarely discuss the history of this instrument. So I want to dive in about the history of the marimba, and then I'll play a bit more, and then we'll have time to have a brief discussion about career development and have a small Q&A. But please feel free to ask questions throughout. So starting with the history of the marimba, this instrument has a very controversial origin story because there are two different sides. Some people think that it came from Southeast Asia, from Balinese, Javanese, gamelan instruments, and then other people think that it came from traditional African xylophones, such as the jeel and the balafone. And so this instrument that we have here is a very modern concert marimba, but it's not like the traditional African xylophones, which actually served a completely different purpose than what we use these instruments for, and they also have a slightly different construction. It's believed that the concept of the marimba came to the Americas during the slave trade, and specifically in Guatemala in the 16th century. The African xylophone developed into an instrument more like what we have here today. So the traditional construction of these instruments, you would have a frame made out of sort of bamboo wood, and then for the notes, you would have rosewood, like this instrument, or another material such as paduk. And these instruments were handcrafted, and the music that you would play was learned through rote learning. So you would have to study with a master player to learn and to pass down the music generationally. We have a different system for learning music, of course, through reading music mostly, and for these traditional instruments also, they had a different layout. They're more of a diatonic instrument, and the tuning system was not a chromatic tuning system like what we have today, where you have the second register on the instrument like you would on a piano for chromatic notes. And there is also not really a standard tuning system. You could find heptatonic instruments, pentatonic instruments, and so on and so forth. So moving into the Americas, once we get to South America and in Guatemala in the 16th century, this instrument was developed through extending the range of the traditional African xylophone and also placing the instrument onto legs so it can stand on its own. And the instrument that we have here today comes from the Guatemalan marimba. The main difference is that the resonators on this instrument are made out of an industrial material of steel, and Traditionally, these instruments, the resonators were made of gourds, which were fitted with a sort of membrane to create a buzzing sound that's characteristic of these more traditional instruments. So the concert marimba, the function of the concert marimba is for more soloistic style playing now. You can also find it in orchestral settings and also concerti, but the purpose of the instrument in traditional settings is for community building. And you can find the instrument a lot in celebrations, birthdays, weddings, and it's a very important part of the funeral ceremony in some cultures in West Africa. So the purpose is quite different. In North America, at least, the first use of the marimba was in sort of vaudeville theater settings, and then it moved to the orchestra through Darius Milhaud's Concerto for Marimba and Vibraphone, and was later popularized through four-mallet playing and solo repertoire. And it's interesting because this instrument has existed for a very long time, but it's also quite new. Only in the last 50 years we began developing all this repertoire. And so in the beginning, marimbas would have to either write music on their own, commission music, or they could transcribe music, which was the easiest option, perhaps. And so you will find a lot of marimbas that play repertoire written for violin, for guitar, even for piano, because there's a large breadth of repertoire on those instruments that have existed for several hundred years. And as a solo instrument, the marimba is still sort of in its renaissance phase for repertoire. The first piece I played for you was Merlin by Andrew Thomas, and that piece was written specifically for the instrument, and it highlights the instrument's strengths. But there's a lot of times where I will play classical music. I will play some Partita No. 2 from Johann Sebastian Bach's Chaconne, written for solo violin. And I think it's a great example of how the marimba can adapt to classical style playing. And after I play this piece, I'd like to go into more of a discussion about career development. I think it's interesting to think of how I went from playing music in undergrad, playing percussion, playing marimba, to turning into a professional career. And this started when I was in my undergrad. And so I think this is a good opportunity for anybody to ask questions and for us to really dive into that conversation. So here is Chaconne from Partita No. 2. Now we have about 20 more minutes, so I'm going to open up the floor for any questions. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
So you say you started doing like more like performing stuff and getting like those career options in your undergrad. When did that start, and when did you realize that you could start like surviving off that kind of stuff?
Right. So something that always interests me when I was in undergrad, and even now at UMich, I'll walk by the practice rooms and I'll hear these just exceptionally amazing students, and then I find out that they don't enter competitions, they don't write grants, they don't know how to write program notes or write a biography, they don't really put themselves out there. And so for me, it was about taking that first step to put myself out there and not just leave all of my hard work in the practice room. And I think it can be really difficult, especially when you're our age, younger, and you still are studying under a teacher and they tell you to do this or to do that, or maybe you're at a school where there's specific repertoire that you have to play for a jury or things like that. But I try as much as possible to just branch outside of this sort of university bubble that we can sometimes get stuck in, and I try to see what's out there outside of school. When I was studying in my undergrad at the University of Toronto, I had access to these amazing performance venues outside of my school. I would just go to different concerts and see different artists, percussionists or not, and I learned so much about programming through watching these different concerts and participating in these different events. And then when it came time for me getting my moment to start a professional career, that only really happened because I didn't get discouraged from all of the other applications that weren't successful that year that I applied. I applied in 2020 for Conservators Guild, and that same year I applied to like 10 other competitions, and what would have happened if I got discouraged and never applied? So it's really about just putting yourself out there and not being afraid of rejection, because everybody is going to face rejection. Even the most successful artists, both in and outside of classical music, have faced countless rejection, but it's all about finding that moment, and that moment will come if you put yourself out there. Yes?
So you mentioned applying to competitions. Could you speak a little bit more to that? Because I don't think many of us know what you're talking about. If it means like sending in a tape, which we sometimes did, decades ago. But now, when you apply to a competition, what are you seeking to apply to? What's the process?
For many competitions, focusing specifically on performance, I would say a big part of that is being able to showcase your ability to program a compelling concert that is meaningful to you, that has a story behind it. And I think a huge part of the application process is showing yourself through the musical choices that you make, through the program notes that you write. Every application should be sort of a story of who you are, rather than here's me playing this super impressive piece and I'm playing all the right notes, because so many people can do that, but only you have this very unique story that is yours to tell. And I think that's what's really important, at least nowadays, in applying for these different competitions. And whether it's performing in person or submitting a tape, you can still have an overarching story in the content that you are choosing to share. And there's usually an interview process these days with these competitions. And a really important part of the interview process is to expand on the story that you told through your programming and through the repertoire that you chose, so that the jury, whoever, can see that this is genuinely who you are, and sort of relate the music you play to the person that you are. And I think that is just a really big deal these days, is to always be intentional with your programming and intentional in your applications for these different competitions. Yes?
You mentioned that you had studied classical piano for a number of years when you were growing up. What was your introduction to the marimba, and how did you end up making that your instrument?
Yes, great question. I remember the first time that I heard marimba was in middle school. I joined the middle school band because I wanted to play keyboard in the jazz band, but then I was like, oh wait, drum set's cooler. So I decided to play drum set in the jazz band, and I remember from there, my band director said, oh, do you want to join the concert band? So I said, okay, I'll do that. And I didn't realize that meant that I'd have to learn all these new instruments that I'd never seen or heard of before. And so that was sort of my introduction to the marimba, was through middle school band. Went into high school band, a lot of marching band. I was in the pit for like all 4 years of high school in marching band, and I loved playing the marimba there and developing all these 4 mallet skills that I eventually had to unlearn because I was taught incorrectly, but that's a whole other story. And from there, with the marimba, I remember thinking, this instrument is really cool, but like, where does it come from? I wanted to learn about the history of the instrument, and learning about the history of the instrument made it feel more like an instrument that I could connect with. And then also with the repertoire, it was really interesting to learn all different techniques that I would never have known about if I just played piano or if I just played drum set. And it just opened up a whole new world to me for new music and research. And I'd say one of the biggest moments where I knew that marimba was my instrument was when I went to this residency in Italy back in 2019, and it was a new music and composition exchange called Soundscape. It's a really great program. If anybody wants to like go to Italy over the summer and play new music, you should check it out. But yeah, during that residency, I was working with different composers, and there was something that I enjoyed about, having conversations about what the possibilities of the instrument are and what is lacking in our repertoire. And I realized that, I can actually contribute to the marimba's development, because it is still in its development stage. And so for me, there's just a lot that hasn't been explored yet with marimba, so that's why I love it sort of as my instrument, I guess you could say. Any other questions?
I have another.
Yes.
So you mentioned your competing led to your the opportunity of being able to concertize on the regular. How do you balance your pursuing your master's and also being a touring concert artist?
Yes. Something that I learned from my undergraduate, Professor Ayun Wang at University of Toronto, is the importance of being organized. And so that was a huge lesson for me to take on to my master's, because now I realize that organizational skills are so much more important than, locking yourself in a practice room for like 8 hours a day. Just being organized and being able to, for example, at the beginning of the school year, for me this year, I sent an email to my conductor saying, this is every date that I'm going to be absent because of my tour for the entire semester, and here are the people that are going to be subbing for me, and just different things like that, so that you're sort of ahead of the game, so that you're not missing out when you're supposed to be somewhere and nobody's expecting you to be at a class and then you just don't show up, but you have to be communicative and just self-sufficient with your organization, and that way you're able to balance being in school and going out for gigs, because you took the initiative and you communicated and everybody is in the loop on what's happening and there's no confusion. So it's a lot of that, and just looking at your calendar well in advance to know where you need to be, when you need to be there, and communicate with teachers, and that's how I approach it, and it seems to work for me very well. Any other questions? Yes?
What do you think is the future of marimba?
That's a great question. And I honestly have no idea, which is very exciting. I do think that in the future, perhaps, this is just a guess, everybody will be holding 6 mallets, and then all of us that play with 4 mallets will be like, whatever, they're not that good. Yeah, I think that's the future of marimba, unfortunately. Yes.
So, I was, when we were listening to the 2 pieces, because I don't know much about marimba myself, but I heard a lot of overtones throughout the entire thing. So is there like something specific to the marimba about that makes it?
Yes, so the way that marimba, the bars are tuned, they're tuned sort of in a 2-step process. So first the center of the bar is shaped to create the fundamental pitch, and then towards the edge of the notes, which we call the nodal points, that is where the second pitch is tuned, or the overtone. And so really depending on where you strike the bar, you'll get more of the fundamental pitch or more of the overtone. And in some cases when I'm playing a piece, I won't strike the center of the bar because it just doesn't work ergonomically for what I'm doing. So I have to strike near the edge, and that will create more of that overtone sound that you're hearing. It's also about sort of the acoustics with the resonators, and sort of the notes bleeding over, especially in a big hall or bigger hall like this one. So yeah, it's mostly from the tuning of the instrument itself. But that's a good question. Yes.
We're just a little bit of time. I just want to make sure. I don't want to monopolize questions. Are there any other questions? Okay. So you play a lot of notes. I mean, a lot of notes. And tonight's, tomorrow night's concert, we're going to see more of your virtuosic capability, but it's a lot of notes to memorize. What is your process of being able to hold all of that in your head?
Yes. So memorizing music, for me, it was really difficult at first because I'm completely blind in my left eye, so reading music is super hard for me. So I went through a process of score studying to learn music. So before I ever approach an instrument, I will memorize the score itself. And that way, when I close my eyes, I can sort of see the score through like a photographic memory type of situation. And that's nice. It comes in handy, especially when, you're working on lots of different music, and then you haven't practiced a certain piece, and then you're like, do I still remember how to play this? Let me see. Oh yeah, there it is.
Wow.
But I think that score studying also is a really great way to maintain health as a performer. If you're just constantly, moving, constantly playing, you can really wear yourself out. And I think something that I noticed a lot for students, young professionals, is that we tend to glorify burnout, and it's almost like a competitive process. Who's the busiest? Who's the most burnt out? Who locked themselves in the practice room for the most hours today? But I think we should be glorifying healthy practice room habits and just organizational skills and self-care. I think that's a lot more productive than, just shredding for hours in the practice room. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, we're just about out of time. Thank you so much for your guesting with us today and your playing. I can't wait for the concert on Friday. And are there any more questions? All right. Well, thank you so much. This was great.